Hello, this is Gimme Empathy, a podcast that's made in Stones Corner, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. I'm the host, Scott Mercer. On this episode of the podcast, you're going to hear from Grace Pashley. Grace is a boss of mine. She is the station manager of community radio station 4ZZZ here in Brisbane. She's been in the role since 2017. She organises hundreds of volunteers to put out 24/7 community radio on the 102.1 FM band and also on Z Digital online. It's a huge job and not without its challenges. As Grace reveals, she was actually quite more revealing than I've expected, actually, in in talking about some of the trials of the job, which was really nice. Grace also plays guitar. She plays in Full Power Happy Hour, which is the project of Alex Campbell, who you may remember from episode 24. Stick around at the end of this episode because I actually have a job for you. I have some work. I have some homework for you to do. So stick around. But this is episode 56 with Grace Pashley.
Live really messes with people's heads.
Yeah, especially because it's kind of hard to there's no feedback.
Yeah, for sure.
Like there's no difference beyond like a light being on. There's no difference between you being on air and off air.
Yeah, you mumbling to yourself off air.
Yeah.
And being on air and it all being real.
So yeah, we were just talking, Grace, about like being able to switch off. And as running a community radio station, hundreds of volunteers, like we're on a long weekend at Easter at the moment. Is it difficult to actually not check your emails and make sure the building hasn't burnt down?
It has gotten much easier to do that with time. Definitely for the first year to 18 months, it was really hard to switch off. And being away from the station, I would generally have one thing churning over in my mind that was the highest risk thing that could happen, that that classic anxiety response where you try to anticipate the outcome so you can kind of think about it before it happens and think about what you'd do if this eventuated and prepare yourself for it in that way. I used to do that a lot. But really in the last month, maybe 2 months, this year's been a lot easier to do that kind of stuff just because I feel like I've done a full lap around the sun. I've seen most things, and even the things that are stressful, they're generally, I've dealt with them before, so I kind of know how to deal with it. But I'm getting a lot better at not checking my emails on long weekends. This long weekend's been great. I just came here from yoga, feeling relaxed. It's been really nice.
What kind of yoga do you do?
Just not hot or Bikram, nothing fancy, just regular yoga.
Garden yoga, vanilla yoga, I believe is the technical term.
Yoga for white people, which I'm pretty sure is like most yoga that happens in Brisbane. But that helps a lot, actually.
How long have you done yoga?
On and off, 5 or 6 years, mostly off, but I've gone back to it since going to this job and, really needing some like exercise that could fit into a routine, and that wasn't, going for a walk or going to the gym, something that was really just up to me to kind of go and do. It's like there's a class there. It runs this time every day. Go and do it. It fits in with the rest of your day. It's easier, I find, to do exercise or to have a kind of hobby that is already in its own set routine, so I can just jump onto that rather than me having to plan it and think about it. Otherwise, it just gets a bit, who could be bothered?
And it can be another stressor, like
totally.
If you're at your job and thinking, I have to plan the thing that's not my job.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
So I know a big part of yoga is mindfulness and like clearing your mind of everything. Are you good at doing that?
Getting better at it. Maybe not clearing my mind, but compartmentalizing stuff so it doesn't all rush up. And I think it really helps with taking one thing at a time. And, I generally don't clear my mind that much at yoga, but sometimes it'll be just quiet enough for that one thing that I'm really kind of obsessing on to run itself out. And I have that space to kind of see that I didn't need to be thinking about that as much as I needed to be thinking about it. And then after, I can let it go.
How do you let things run them, like things that, so a thing that you've been thinking about a lot, going over and over in your brain, that doesn't necessarily even have a solution that you can, that is within your control. How do you let it run itself out? I've not been able to figure that out.
I mean, it's generally the smaller problems that I don't, that's like really just, I'm only thinking about them so much because my anxiety is really high and I'm just kind of making a problem out of something that's not, like you said, doesn't have an answer, doesn't particularly need me to solve it. It's just something that for some reason I've latched onto and I'm worried about it. And I've been trying really hard to like use that mindfulness, and probably therapy has helped more than yoga, to actually develop strategies to get a bit of space in between the thing that I'm worried about, the worry itself, like separating the worry itself and the thing, and being able to like work on the worry more than the thing, and kind of like, okay, you're feeling anxious, and it's not necessarily that this thing that you're thinking about or you're worried about is a huge deal, huge issue. It's just that your anxiety is really high, so it's just jumped over to this nearest available thing and it's making an issue of that. So it's more like taking some space to, because that takes a lot of space and a lot of thinking to like address every issue in that way. So doing something like yoga or exercise or just, going and taking a walk gives you that time to be like, okay, why am I worried about that? Does it need to be that big a deal? How can I deal with this in a way that's not going to, burn me out just on that one issue? So I really like it for that.
So was that a thing what kind of therapy do you do?
So I see a psych just like I started seeing a psych after I was really not dealing with the anxiety and stress of work. And I hadn't seen one before that, but I'd always had, pretty anxious person in general, but I'd always been able to deal with it just because my surrounds I hadn't been dealt with these, things that anxiety would attach themselves to. So yeah, it's been a lot of like work on how to deal with stress and how to deal with anxiety. I love this textbook that my therapist gave me. It's Managing Stress. That's what it's called. And it's got this like funny photocopied layout and it's like bound like you would a grade 7 book report.
Does it have like exercises in it?
Yeah, it's got exercises in it. It's really cute.
Does that appeal to you?
It does, because it was just something tangible that I could go away and like study rather than, well, maybe as well as exercise and taking some time out to clear my mind. If I was at a level where I was just like couldn't chill out, couldn't exercise, couldn't think about anything else, I could at least concentrate on this textbook thing and read all these things, and then I'd just be concentrating on that, and it at least gave me a kind of track that wasn't whatever I was worrying about. And I was like, oh, this is actually useful. Some of it's kind of funny and bogus, but...
Is it like a textbook in that it has like the answers in the back upside down or something?
Oh my God, I haven't even looked at the back of it.
It's probably got all the answers to life in there.
Holy crap. I've got to leave right now. I've got to go find out the answers to life. I never even thought about that. Clearly I haven't made it through the whole textbook.
Well, have you, were you a good student?
Yeah. Huge nerd.
Where'd you go to school? Where are you from?
So I grew up on the Sunshine Coast and I went to school in Noosa. I went to Catholic schools up there. I went to St. Teresa's High School, which I am told is where that band The Chats went to high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, quite a few years younger than me. But I'm pretty sure they played in St. Teresa's Idol, which is like the school talent competition, which I went to. I did that talent competition, and Connor Brooker, who is in such bands as Bugs and Whitewash and Pro Vita and stuff like that. So what can I say? St. Teresa's Idol, pumping out a lot of hot talent up there.
What was the focus of the school? Like academic, sports?
It was really... I think about this a lot because when I went to high school, I was really academic and I really wanted to do well in school and go and do something at uni and blah, blah, blah. And I really wanted my parents to send me to a boarding school in Brisbane so I could go and I don't know what I thought would be different. Probably just the maybe the opportunities or maybe the people that I was around. I am so glad that I didn't do that though. But the focus of the school was really... It wasn't either or, academic or sport. They were both pretty equally focused on. It had a nice feel to it. The school was really focused on making people comfortable. Or maybe it wasn't that they were focused on that. Maybe it was just that it was kind of a casual school it was only like 5 years old when we were the third graduating cohort, I think. So it would have had to have been older than that. But, it was a fresh school that was just establishing itself, and that lent itself to a comfortable environment because it didn't have that,
that history or culture embedded.
Yeah.
I guess, being only 5 years old, I mean, a huge part of that is the students.
Totally.
And like if you get one ratty or dangerous cohort, in one grade, that can kind of ripple down.
Schools are really reputational, and it's something that I thought about a lot because a lot of like you said, the kids who are at the school really shape it. And a lot of the kids who I went through school with, we'd all been through primary school together. All our families knew each other. It was really quite tight knit. And when you know someone for 10 years at 16, 17, then you're pretty forgiving of them. And
yeah.
Well, I mean, I was. Maybe that's not true for everyone. But, you see the popular girls will say it's still the popular girls in grade 12 as they were in grade 3. So it's just like...
So being up at Noosa, like you mentioned, you really wanted to go to boarding school in Brisbane. Did you have this image of Brisbane as some sort of intellectual emerald city?
For as long as I can remember, since I became cognizant of the world outside Noosa, I wanted to leave. It's a beautiful part of the world, beautiful place to grow up. And I was really lucky to have the friends that I did, who I think about this more and more every year that goes on. I'm still, very close with all the people I went through school with, and a lot of them live in Brisbane now, but some of them still live up the Sunshine Coast, and I caught up with a lot of them over the weekend. And I was just thinking, like, how many people have this where they're, still on the same page as the people that they knew when they were 5 and can still call them up whenever and have a huge chat, even if we haven't spoken for years. So I had a really good close group of friends who we were kind of on that headspace where we're like, the beach is whatever, but I guess we'll go hang there because that's the only thing to do. But I was adamant that when I left school, I was moving to Melbourne or Sydney, and I was going to go to uni, and that was what I was going to do first thing since I moved out of school. I had one friend who was going to do it with me, and Melbourne turned into Sydney because she really wanted to stay near the beach. And I was like, do you really? Okay, fine, I guess we'll go to Sydney. And then Sydney became Brisbane because Brisbane was close to the Sunshine Coast, which was the setup anyway. And by that stage, I'd kind of realised, that I had no idea what it was going to be like to live by myself. So I wasn't going to move to Melbourne, Sydney. That's terrifying. I'm not going to do that. Which I don't reflect on that often, but I think I'm really glad I've lived my 20s and I'm living my 20s in Brisbane. I think it's a really exciting place to be. But that first year out of school, I went to college and on one of those residential campuses, and it was so shit. I really hated it. And it was just not the eye-opening, you're in the big city now, this is, all of this is open to you. It was this is what it would have been like if you went to boarding school for the last 3 years. It's just insular and so shit. It was not what I was looking for in my metropolitan experience.
What was it about it? The people or
It was the institution and the expectations that came with it. I had this fantastic group of friends from school, most of whom had just moved to Brisbane. I wanted to be friends with them and see them. And some of them went to college as well, different colleges, and we'd see them around, but they were having their own issues with the institution. But it's just this, everything that I imagine is bad about boarding school, shitty meals, forced socialization with people that you have potentially nothing in common with, and shaming you if you step outside of those social norms that are set by the college. And it was I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew that it made me feel really uncomfortable and I didn't like it. And it made me feel really isolated. And for the first time ever, I wanted to go back to the Sunshine Coast. Luckily, I met some people through what I was studying and, had mates who were planning on leaving the next year, and I ended up moving up. I only went there for a year.
What were you studying?
I started studying law and arts. It's a double degree. I made it maybe 2 years into that and I changed to journalism. And I finished with that eventually.
What did you want to be when you were growing up?
A journalist or a lawyer. Yeah. And I'm very glad, like, I think sometimes that I would like to go back and finish my law degree just because when you're 18, most of that stuff is so lost on you and you have, you know, how you're meant to grasp all of these big, complex concepts that are only really kind of rooted in reality in this like really legalistic, jargonistic way. It's really hard to grasp as an 18-year-old and it makes it even harder to study. But I think it would be really interesting now to go back to and learn about with a bit of life experience. But I definitely wanted to be a journalist. I did that for like a second and was like, nah.
So after you finished your degree?
I worked at the National Indigenous Radio Service as, it was journalism. I did bulletins for the service.
Like on air?
It was all pre-recorded.
Right.
Yeah, but that was my first paid radio job. When I was doing journalism, I went on exchange to the University of Texas and I studied there for 6 months.
In Austin?
Yeah. Yeah, that was like definitely a turning point in my life because I went and I volunteered at KVRX, which is their college radio station, and I had a show on there where I played all Australian music and it's called Banana Stand. And I just loved it and I met some amazing people.
They would have loved that.
It was pretty common for exchange students to go and...
so there was like a slot waiting for you on the radio for the exchange student.
There wasn't. Like it was, I'm proud of myself that I did it because it was kind of hard to find. But, you know, I found out that other people did it after I'd got in there and they were like, oh yeah, do you know that thing of when you're overseas and, you know, some person knows one Australian person, so they ask if you know them.
And then sometimes the worst thing is you do. It's like, my cousin dated that person.
I don't think anything like that happened. I met a really good friend. I made a really good friend on exchange who was actually studying law and journalism, and turns out we'd been in the same class at the University of Queensland for 4 years, but never meeting each other, and met each other in Austin, and you know, still really good mates.
So yeah, what else did you learn from living in Austin?
I learned what it was like to be truly independent, and I was living in a co-op, which was like kind of everything that I wanted my college experience to be.
I've heard about these Austin co-ops. So are they on campus?
They're in the neighbouring suburb.
Right.
So the one that I lived at was Pearl Street Co-op, and it was the biggest one, about 120 people living there. And the way that they work is that to live there, you have to sign up to a labour team. So, you know, you're part of a cooking crew or a maintenance crew or a cleaning crew, or, you know, something else that contributes to the functioning of the house. And lunch and dinner are made for you by the cooking crew, and, you know, all the food is bought by the
shopping crew?
Yeah, like the kitchen coordinator or something like that. And the meals are planned by a student who lives there. I think that actually set me up pretty well for coming to Z because it was a real collective model, and seeing the way that some of those, like, I just saw how wrong it could go because it was even more Lord of the Flies. Not that Triple Z's Lord of the Flies, but it was pretty like, here's what happens when you put a bunch of under 25-year-olds in charge of their own living situation, but also in charge of each other. And there were some pretty hectic incidents where, and, you know, everyone would come convene in this meeting and, you know, people got evicted and all this stuff. But it was so much fun living there. It was Austin is a really beautiful city. It was changing a lot even when I was there, which was 5 years ago. And lots of people were moving there and everyone was saying, the old Austin's not here anymore. And I can only imagine what it's like now that South By's got even more techie. And there was a lot of incentives for tech companies to come to Austin and set up business there back then. So I'm sure it's made a change to how it all feels. But I think in that university suburb, then it was kind of somewhat inoculated from it because there's always a changing population of students.
Did you go to South by Southwest while you were there?
I didn't. I went in the wrong semester. Yeah. So I've still never been to South by Southwest, which it seems like too big to enjoy.
Yeah.
Kind of like Coachella.
Yeah.
Like, how does anyone ever navigate their way around those streets when there's a bajillion people there?
It would be fun if you had all the connections and could go see,
Absolutely.
Bill Murray playing piano or Jay-Z or whatever.
Yeah, yep. And I think there'd be a way to do it. But the co-op that I lived at, we had gigs there pretty frequently. We'd clear out the kitchen hall. And actually, a lot of the co-ops would have gigs pretty frequently, which was really fun. And the station KVRX had their 20th anniversary in 2014 when I was there. And we had a big, organising, it was kind of part of organising it all, but mostly just sitting on the door and stamping people in the night. But that was really cool. Saw a lot of music in Austin, which I think is how it was so formative, because I was always, into music and liked going out to gigs, but I wasn't really part of any scene in a way that made it, it was part of a community that I feel like I'm now.
Well, let's go back. What kind of music were you listening to back in school?
In high school, I really, if we're talking about my obsession point artists, I loved Laura Veers, Feist, Adele, Amy Winehouse. I'm talking really early Adele, when she just had that EP out, and that was really beautiful. I never really liked all the ballady stuff, and same with Amy Winehouse. Basically anything I can sing in the shower, I was really obsessed with. But I also really loved Grizzly Bear, Outkast. One of my best friends, Jean, her iTunes got wiped from one of her computers. So her super cool cousin who lived in Melbourne made her a mix CD of Feist, Laura Veers, PJ Harvey, Coco Rosie, all of these bands that just opened our minds, and we were just obsessed with this mix CD. And I credit a lot of my music taste to Molly Lucan, who I still have never met, and one day hope to meet and thank her for opening my mind.
When you moved to Brisbane and you were studying, so that was at UQ, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you going out and seeing gigs then?
Yeah, I was going out to Alhambra and mostly just there.
What happened to that place?
I think it got shut down for underage drinking.
Oh, okay, yeah. On, what was it, Lambda? The club night?
Lambda, yep. So I went to a lot of those club nights and those other things that were in the vicinity, like Oh Hello. Nothing that is music that I like now that was really coming up in Brisbane in the early 2010s, late 2000s. So the kind of music that was coming up in Brisbane that I discovered way after it was happening, I was like, holy shit, that was happening in Brisbane? Where have I been this whole time? And that was really, Austin was it really lit a fire under me to go and find the local music that was actually being made. Because, all the really successful Brisbane bands like Last Dinosaurs and Ballpark Music and all the people who were playing gigs at Alhambra and Lambda and went on to that more Triple J track. I kind of knew and liked, and I can't even remember really how I found music then. I read a lot. I wrote for actually that's how I discovered underground Australian music. That's right. I was doing music writing for a few different places, and then I started writing for a blog called Who the Hell.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So then that just fully was another door that I found myself loving everything that came my way, and was just how did I never know about this stuff? And then I was just reading other blogs, and when Mess and Noise was a thing, and there's a Sydney one that I think was called Polaroids for Androids or something like that.
Yeah. I remember that, yeah.
And Weirdo Wasteland that James Frostick runs still, that's my favourite blog that's still running, and that's amazing that he has kept that running, and I sincerely hope that it keeps going, because God, the online media landscape has just taken a dive.
It seems like a lot of those Australian music blogs, all they do now is post photos of gigs. There's not a lot of writing anymore.
Yeah, and the ones that get traction and have a lot of sway, they're all it's paid editorial, which is just a shit model, but it's the only model that's sustainable that people have figured out, because a lot of the reason that those other blogs have dropped off is because people were burnt out. The people who are running these blogs probably have a show on community radio, probably paying 3 different bands. They're all doing, spread over 7 other passion projects. But my friend Maddie Lang's editor of Who the Hell now, so she's got impeccable taste in music, and she's probably my favorite music writer, just unabashedly honest. She had a show, she started the show Girls Can Tell on Triple Z.
So how did you get into music writing?
I was into music first and was interested in music media. And I kind of just started, looking for internships when I changed over to journalism, and was kind of trying to see whether I wanted to go into the like music journalism route, or I don't really know where I ended, where I am now. But I decided that news journalism probably wasn't for me. And I just started like emailing blogs saying, can I have a go? And got this gig with Who the Hell, which I'm so, so thankful for. Mel Tan and Annie Toller, who were the editors at the time. I think I actually went on their website and I read all the contributors' bios, and I read Maddie's and saw that she lived in Brisbane and saw the bands that she liked. And I was like, I like those bands. And she was just so funny. She's such a funny writer. And I was like, yeah, okay, this is the one that I really want. I'm going to try really hard to get this. And I did. And I just found that really easy because everything that I wrote about, I really loved. And it wasn't like, go and pan this shit band and, bring me 500 words that are going to get me X amount of clicks. I've never worked anywhere that's like that. So
Did you do live reviews?
I did that for Triple Z, and I did reviews for the New Releases show when I was first starting out. But Who the Hell was really my first. I don't think I did any other blogs. Oh no, I think the first time I wrote something about music was for Project U, which is now, I don't know if it's still around now, but they're more focused on like kind of commercial leaning or pop leaning artists. But I wrote something about Blink-182 because I'd just seen them at Soundwave, and about how my 20s were complete at the ripe age of 20. So I think I started writing for them a little bit. Just wherever I could shout my opinion about a band that I liked.
Well, doing journalism, did you have any other side hustles going on to kind of, get experience? And
Yeah, I had a few. Just before I went to America, I was writing for Who the Hell, and I wrote for this intranet service where I went around and would write reviews of cafes in Brisbane or things for office workers to do in Brisbane for like this Brisbane office intranet. It's very strange, but it was paid. And then when I went over to the States, I did KVRX and did a lot of stuff there. I did a show, but I did other volunteering things, just little bits here and there. Did music processing, which was awesome. And how I got heaps of, ripped a lot of that music to my own computer. Or whatever. I don't know. US copyright laws enough to feel guilty about that. When I got back from America, I went and I kind of felt like that was me trying out my music journalist chops. And then when I got back, I started interning at NERS, Indigenous Radio, and trying to get some more experience on the news side of things. And I really enjoyed that, but it just didn't, it wasn't satisfying in the same way that I found being involved in music media was, because it was like this whole thing, like you fully stepped into it and you were writing about bands who you were going to see on the weekend, who, you were either friends with or like 2 degrees separated from, and you kind of stepped into this whole community, and I found that really satisfying. And also like a really interesting line to walk between telling someone that their band's shit and liking them as a person but not liking their music, which is,
it's still a line we walk every day.
It's a line we walk every day. That's exactly, you would know.
So I guess it must have been natural when you got back from Texas to go to Triple Z then, if that's the sort of stuff you're into. Like what, had you been aware of, you must have been aware of Triple Z before.
Only in a really peripheral way. When I was going through uni and, going out to gigs in Brisbane, I was mostly hearing about stuff through, I don't know, the Lambda Facebook page. And I found out about bands through Triple J and the blogs that I was writing for. And then I found out about Triple Z really late. Like I'd been in Brisbane for 4 years before really kind of understanding that Triple Z was something that I could access and go and volunteer at. And kind of after I was at NERS, I was like, I'm going to take a step back from the work there and I'm going to go try and get involved with Triple Z. And I went and did a news internship.
Was that part of your course?
I think so. I'd done a lot of industry work by the time that I went to Triple Z, but I think I got that signed off as my industry experience because the timing was just right. So, yeah, that was really the first time that I kind of got involved with Triple Z at the end of 2015, and then just kind of spread my tentacles.
Well, what were your first impressions of the station?
It was dirty. The newsroom was downstairs still, and I'll never forget this one. We're doing, one of the guys on our news crew would always be late, always step out for half an hour to have a cigarette. And I just remember one day I walked upstairs to go to use the loo, and there was shit everywhere. Shit all over the toilet, shit all over the floor. And I was like, hey, mate, like, what's going on here? What's happened? You know, have you let someone in? And he was just like, oh, yeah, I just let this woman in. She didn't look in a very good way and she just had to use the toilet. Do you think that was a bad idea? And I was like, okay, well, you need to go and clean that up. And it just like a place where stuff like that could happen was my impression of Triple Z. And it was, the programming's changed a lot over the last 5 years. 4 years since I've been involved. And I was still kind of trying to navigate what this place was and what it meant for me and what I could do there. And it took me a little while to find, you know, the people that I had stuff in common with at Triple Z. And when I found them, I was like, oh my God, you guys are the best people ever. And, you know, found some of the most amazing, interesting and interested people that I've ever met, and, you know, really fantastic friendships formed. But it did take me a little while. And Michelle Brown was super supportive of, you know, getting me a show. And
she was station manager at the time?
Yeah, yep.
And that toilet is now named after her. There's a plaque.
Brownie's Loo. Good on you, Brownie. It's much more clean. We make sure that our wonderful maintenance volunteers, Joe Hogar and Dylan Walker, clean the toilets regularly every week. And they keep that plaque shined. Yeah, so it was really just like getting in there, and as a Z-liner, which is what we call the people who do the news, figuring out what it meant for me and how I could get involved in different ways.
Did you like being on air?
I loved being on air. It's still my favourite thing to do at Triple Z. And I still think it's the best thing you can do by being involved at the station. And I think it is most people's primary goal when they want to get involved with Triple Z is to have their own show and do all that kind of on-air stuff. But I miss it so much. It's just the best. How long have you been doing Exit Stage Z for?
Danny asked me this the other day. I think 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And then I was volunteering for like a year, not even a year before that, a little bit before that, just in the music department.
Yeah, right.
But I got a show quite quickly.
Yep.
I think I was very lucky.
I mean, it happens. It still happens. If you look like you're switched on and you're clued into the right kind of music, as in music that isn't already represented on the station, or, you know, you're coming in to represent a community that's not already represented on the station, or that kind of bolsters what we're trying to do, then, I mean, this is my mentality. I will make room for you and your show. And I mean, that a lot of the time that means that I will really enthusiastically badger people to change their schedules to fit a slot that I have open. But I have found that, you know, if the programming people, whoever they may be at the time, see a slot available and see someone who's keen and capable, then, you know, they get in there. Our grid changes a lot more than other community stations' grids, which I think is probably a good thing.
I guess we just have more shows.
That's absolutely right. We have more shows and kind of janky slots in this janky grid. But even with that, we have people who stay for, you know, really long periods of time.
I guess when I came on as well, I didn't actually get the show I applied to do.
True.
I got put on an existing show.
Oh, okay.
Which I think was in hindsight, absolutely a better thing to happen, because the show I applied to do kind of eventually evolved into this podcast.
Yeah, right. That's awesome.
And if I had to do that every week live to air, I don't think that would have worked. So it was very good to come on and with Josh Donnellan at the time. Because two people were leaving Exit Stage Z, Dara and Jody, who'd started the show. And I think that's kind of best to be able to come into an existing show and sit on and see how it runs, rather than going in with what might be a cool idea, But there's actually no way of knowing if that's going to work.
No, and you can't gauge your capacity to do an hour-long interview show every week. Of course you can do that when you're writing the show application, but when life happens, that's what I really try to say to people, is that this is a fabulous idea if you are paid to do this and you could dedicate the resources that it requires to do this show to the, standard that you're saying you're going to deliver it every week. And I just encourage people to be flexible and kind to themselves in the same way that in terms of delivering their show, there's obviously a line. You have to be professional and you have to be delivering. But when I was doing the show that I started, The Amplifier, I think I got to maybe 2 or 3 grids in and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't commit to this every week. Which now I'm looking back and I'm like, what the hell was that train of thought? You loved that thing. And it was just because I thought I wasn't doing a good enough job and I wasn't happy with what I was putting out that I should just not do it. And Ian Pound pulled me aside and he was just like, he didn't say this, but he was basically like, pull your head out. You're fine. You could do this on your ear. Keep going. It's worth doing. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Thanks, Ian.
Well, let's rewind. Like, how long after you joined the news department did you apply for a show?
Pretty quickly. I would have joined the news department in about October 2015 and I had a show by February 2016, that next grid. So I kind of went in there and I was just like, similar feeling to when I walked into Pearl Street at Austin, which is the name of the co-op. And when I walked into KVRX, I just kind of breathed out and was like, this is my place. I like this place. And I walked into Triple Z and I was just like, I feel home here and I want to get something out of this, which is what made me really try to, do more volunteering and do heaps of different things. So I did announcer training as soon as it came up and I applied for a show as soon as it came up.
What was the idea behind the amplifier?
Australian music. And it kind of grew into a female non-binary Australian music focus, but it was always just Australian music. I wanted to put those parameters on it because it made me continue to dig and continue to look for new music all the time rather than be able to rest on, pull from the discography of anyone. So it kind of narrowed the focus of it and I thought it made it really relevant to a Triple Z audience. And I'm so glad I did that because I was also still writing for Who the Hell at the time. So I was already looking for music coming out of there and it would often overlap. I had a segment that was Amplify Her. So every week I would choose a different female, or it was at the time female artist, and I would interview them about whatever they were doing at the time and get them to choose 3 tracks from other female artists that had inspired them or informed their work. And that was really fun. But again, one of those segments that I said I'd do every week that maybe ended up being every second week, every 4th week, and then I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
I just started interviewing people, which it's so funny when you go into these things, you're like, I have to do something so obscure and so different and it has to be completely different and unheard of, like nothing that's ever done before. But my favorite radio to listen to is just a good interview and with an artist who is relevant and doing something interesting. And you don't have to have these really distinct parameters on that. You just have to be a good interviewer.
And it is fun for some shows to have like little gimmicks like Alphabet Soup.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Letter of the Week and all like little like bitty segments like a burst of Bartlett for breakfast on Zcast.
Yeah.
But doing a big thing every week can be, especially when you're a volunteer.
Yeah, it just sets you up to fail.
Yeah, and you have to actually, pay to keep a roof over your head in some other way.
In some other way, yep. Not just for the love of it.
And you used to do, I remember that little video thing with Claire.
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
And Claire Armstrong.
That was so funny.
It was so much fun to make. It was tea time. But then we started doing other little video projects. But we'd get a local artist on who had a release or something to chat about, and we'd talk to them over a cup of tea. And we used to talk about their favourite biscuits. We had Morad on, so we had to cater to her vegan bickies. Found out that Oreos are vegan. And I think, Morad and Clay and a few other people. I can't remember. But that didn't last very long until I got... I was doing the digital content coordinator role at the time, which was a grant-funded role at the station, that was like the best thing ever, that role.
What exactly does that involve?
So I ran Triple Z's social media, did all their digital content, made the videos, and I did some web stuff as well, but it was mostly just social media. And that was just such a hoot. Definitely not as high pressure as this job, but I still got to say I worked at Triple Z, and I still got to, be really involved with station decision making and having, ideas that I could see come to life. I found that really, really satisfying, feeling like I could build something from the ground up, because we didn't do much video content, so I could build series that hadn't been there before. So that was really fun. And then, of course, I'd put myself in front of the camera because I am a huge egomaniac and I love the sound of my own voice. And I love interviewing people. And if you can probably tell from the amount of time that I've taken up in this podcast already, I love talking. So I really loved that I could have my own show, go and do these video segments. And back then I kind of thought that's what I was going to do next. I was going to find somewhere that I could be paid to do this stuff.
What were you doing for money at this point?
So I worked at Merlot Coffee.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I worked there on and off since I got back from America. I left there when I got the job at NERS. I was there for about 6 months, and then I went back to Merlot after I left NERS. But at that stage, I was working at Merlot a couple days, and I was getting paid at Triple Z a couple days. So it's just like this. And I was working in the Merlot head office then as well when I was working at Triple Z. So it's just like so cushy, and I just go to work and I do this like data entry stuff at Merlot, and I go home and then I go to Z and I do all this really creative fun stuff. And then it was a good life for that like little 3-month period. I managed a really good balance.
How did it get unbalanced?
I became the station manager of Triple Z in a very unexpected and strange way.
Well, so Michelle Brown had been there a long time. Well, when I got to the station, there was kind of the triumvirate who shared manager roles. So it was Michelle Brown, Mickey Padovan, and Stacey Coleman.
Yeah.
And then one by one, they sort of left to go to Q Music and all these other fabulous opportunities. And then finally Michelle left. And so was Inez Tulloch acting station manager for a while?
Inez was acting manager for about 6 months, maybe not that long, before Claire Whiting got the job.
Yeah, and so it seemed like Claire was going to be more permanent.
Yeah, she got the job in a permanent role. And in that time, there'd been a restructure because, like you said, we had went from the triumvirate to the co-station manager role, and then the board restructured the organisation to a one station manager role supported by a finance and admin.
Why was that?
I think, looking back at it and being in this role, I can't see how a co-station manager role would work, just because the nature of the place is that you need one person to make the decisions and then delegate it out to people. I can see the logic behind the co-station manager role, and I can see where it came from with our collective model history and being a really collaborative organisation, which we still are. It still just helps to just have me for stuff to either fall back on or for people to ask questions to. But just having two, it kind of gives two people two really stressful jobs. But then, like, some people need to ask only this station manager questions, and some people only need to ask this station manager questions, but then sometimes wires are crossed, and to me it just like looked chaotic, and I'm very glad that there's just one, even though like I just think it makes sense. So when Inez was acting station manager, she just did the most heroic 4-month stretch of work I've ever seen in my life, because we were doing that restructure, but we didn't have the finance and admin officer, so Inez was basically doing 2 full-time jobs. And, it was really busy for her and Thigh Master at that period as well, the band that she plays in, one of the bands that she plays in. And it's just seeing her come into work every day, I was just like, just wanted to, go over and light a candle and...
just stand up and start a slow clap every morning as she came in.
Just a truly heroic effort. And so Claire came into that new structure where we had hired Anne Ashton as the finance and admin officer, and Claire came in as the station manager there. So that was the first setup as the new structure. And then ipso facto, I was a station manager. A lot of stuff happened in that 6 months. But Triple Z's a really hard place to come into. from the outside, and especially at that time.
And Claire hadn't come up from, like, she hadn't been volunteering there, had she?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's really, it can be really insular at times, which is something I'm really aware of, and something that I felt actually when I first started volunteering. There were all these like, oh, you know this because this person did this. And I'm like, no, why would I know that? Who cares? I don't care about that person. Just because you think they're cool doesn't mean I think they're cool. And, you know, she came into that, but it was mostly like, well, this person has this 10-year-long HR history with Triple Z and I need you to fix it right now. And she came up all against a lot of really difficult situations, just one after the other. And she made some incredible ground. When she left, I said to her that she broke a lot of ice, but she broke it with her head. And it really took a toll on her. But Claire was a fantastic manager, a fantastic person, just wrong place, wrong time.
So when the vacancy came up, what made you decide to apply?
So when Claire left, Andrew Bartlett, who was the chair at the time, actually asked me to be acting station manager. We were just about to go into Radiothon and just couldn't do that as a headless chook. And honestly, fuck knows why he asked me to do that, because I had no idea what I was doing. And like, really precarious situation. And I could tell it was precarious because one of the first things that Andrew said to me was like, it's bad, but I've seen it way worse. And it's been worse. Triple Z survived, you know, thick and thin through the years. There's been plenty of far more precarious situations that have happened. And I was like, wow, it must be bad. What am I looking at? But I just said yes because I didn't really know what I was signing up for. How hard could it be? And after I started, I was acting for maybe 3 months. After Radiothon really buoyed my confidence because we had a really good Radiothon. Everyone really rallied around to support me doing what I was doing, but to support the station. I kind of just saw like, okay, well, in times of need, this organisation knows what to do, and the people who are in this organisation are familiar with this kind of setting. So sure, I'll put my hand up to do it in a more permanent capacity. And again, I kind of felt an obligation to continue doing what I'd started in an acting role because I felt like we were going okay, but also I didn't really know what I was signing up for. And if I knew the full scope of it, I honestly don't know if I would have said yes or if I would have applied, because it's real, like it was really full on, and I learned pretty much everything on the job. But now that I've got to a stage where I can get a bit of space from that and see some results of the stuff that I've been doing and that we've all been working on for the last year or so, I'm really happy that I did. I really don't know. Yeah. I don't know why I did it. Sometimes I like opportunities. I like being opportunistic, and it just seemed like, how could I say no to this? So that's why I did it. Turns out there are many reasons why you can say no to things. But, you know, here we are, nearly 2 years down the track, and it's all going okay.
You'd had a bit of experience like in radio before and announcing. You knew how the station worked. Had you ever done anything before where you actually had to like manage people?
Not like this. I'd been like a shift manager at restaurants that I used to work at and cafes, stuff like that. But not like this, where you actually have to manage the people, but also manage the structure and, you know, manage wages and devise positions and, you know, manage volunteers and manage paid staff and make sure that everyone's getting the support that they need, especially in those volunteer coordinator roles, because people give up so much of their time and, you know, have a real ownership over what they do and, you know, are often the ones that need the least support because they're there and they know what they're doing all the time. So you kind of just think, oh, thank God that department's running fantastically. I'm just going to ignore it and pay attention to the issue that's cropped up in front of me when, you know, that person could really be struggling doing what they're doing. And actually the whole time we've had a really good crop of people who are just super dedicated. But I haven't managed anyone like this before.
When you started, did you immediately have a bunch of ideas of things and processes you thought could go better, or was it just like putting out fires?
Putting out fires putting out fires was the first little bit. And I kind of needed that because I had a lot of ideas, but they might not have been the right things to do straight up. And I kind of learnt very quickly that you need to really sit with, when you come into an organization, like into a manager role, probably anyway, you need to sit with it for a little while to learn how it is all working now, figure out the things that are broken and figure out why they're broken so you can fix them properly, rather than just being like, that's bad. There's probably a reason why it was done like that, and you need to figure out that reason first before you change it. So it was kind of good that all these fires came up that taught me a lot and unveiled some, bigger issues that had to be fixed in a really specific way, or, yeah. But now it feels like, and over the last 6 months, we've transitioned into more of doing all these strategic projects. We've had a strategic plan the whole time, and we've been working on these strategic projects and operational plan projects throughout the whole time, but I can devote more of my energy to them than I have been able to in that first little bit.
Well, what were some of the fires?
The quotas, dealing with changing a process that had been in place for 30 years nearly. So Triple Z, as you would know, have airplay quotas that cut across a few categories, and that is in lieu of having any station playlisting. We just say to announcers, here's your 2 hours, these are the expectations, hit the mission statement and hit the quotas, and play us the show that you said you'd play on your show application.
And the quotas are set by the Community Broadcasters Association of Australia?
So the CBAA only set one quota, which is actually delivered through ACMA, and that is to play, all community broadcasters need to play 25% Australian music. The quotas that we have were all self-defined and self-imposed. So the quotas for women and non-binary artists, for local artists, for new music, and now for First Nations artists, they're all completely self-imposed. And we'd set, all of those categories had been defined except for the First Nations quota in the 80s, when we first, as a station, decided that we would not be playlisted, but we would try to represent these communities who are underrepresented elsewhere.
And those quotas were, like the original ones, were quite modest.
They were.
But it was just, I guess back in the 80s, even that these modest targets would have seemed radical given the rest of the media landscape in Brisbane.
Totally. And even just the concept of quotas, it's controversial now, and it would have been even more controversial then. But I think as an organisation, we were pretty used to being on the outer with that kind of stuff in the 80s. But when I stepped into this role, we were at the end of a nearly 2-year consultation process with the view of increasing our quotas. So we were gunning for 50% women and non-binary artists, 40% Australian music. I think it was 30% local artists and 5% new artists. 5% First Nations artists. So those new quota targets, they were set by the board, and they were actually, all of those ones were where we landed. They weren't set that at those figures at the beginning. There was a lot of consultation and a lot of feedback around, I think it was the Australian quota that was the one that moved, and perhaps even the women and non-binary quota. No, surely that one didn't.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think Australian went down to third. Wait, no.
Because at the moment it's 30. I think maybe we were gunning for 50% Australian music.
Right, okay, yeah.
Which we hit very easily as a station. We hit about 60% Australian music across a year. But basically we went to implement these new quotas after a 2-year consultation process, and a bunch of people decided that we hadn't consulted enough, and it ended up being this thing that I had to really manage on the spot because I did not see it coming. And because I thought we'd done this consultation, and we had done this consultation, and I was a part of it. I was a part of all the working groups and, really involved. And at a station like Triple Z, you kind of assume that people are for progress and people are for making changes and blah, blah, blah. But some of the conversations that came out of that were incredibly disheartening and really showed me that I didn't know everything about this place, and that I was going to be surprised probably more often than I wasn't. But basically what happened was we had, lengthy email conversations that involved the entire volunteer base.
Wars, I would call them.
Wars would be one word for it.
It started off pretty civil.
But as, you know, it's a long... We decided that we would let this conversation happen because we wanted everyone to be able to say that they had their voice heard. And the best disinfectant is sunlight. So you air some of these views that people were airing, and they pretty quickly saw that they didn't have a place at a progressive organisation like Triple Z. I think a lot of what came out of it was not necessarily, and I think it's probably worth saying that the most controversial quota was the women and non-binary quota, where we were asking people to play 50% women and non-binary artists on their show. And I think people really had an issue with quotas as a concept and as a method of addressing what we were trying to address. I completely, quotas are not a perfect system. They have their limits, but they are the best system for addressing any kind of systemic issue you have in an organisation, or I think they're the best for addressing any kind of systemic anything, really, because you say, I don't care what you believe. Not, I don't care. These are the rules, and I need you to go and look for 50% of female artists to fill your show. A lot of the arguments that were pushing back on this were that would be discriminatory to male artists because there isn't gender parity in people producing music, which I think is bogus. And a lot of the stats that people were producing are just stats, they're just membership stats for other organisations. There's no one body that can say they wholly represent people who produce music in their bedroom or, aren't signing up to APRA for whatever reason.
And even if that were true, that more men did make music, why is that?
It's not,
and
that's
perhaps
exactly
that's
right.
something that we can do to fix.
That's exactly right. And the kind of visibility that female non-binary artists get on Triple Z is huge. And, I think we're one of the only stations that releases our airplay data on gender diversity and on the gender breakdown of artists that we're playing across a whole year. And across the whole year of 2018, we did hit that 50% mark, which I'm super proud of, because this whole quota conversation was happening at the beginning of 2018 and really didn't know what way it was going to go. But I think it made a lot of people double down on their beliefs and, play even more women on air. And even the people who were against it, they came on board and they're broadly behind it. I mean, their playlists show that they're broadly behind it. So that was a huge fire, and that was mentally exhausting because I was moderating that email conversation and trying to make the decision that was, people saying some kind of hurtful stuff that people would then complain to me about, but I had to let this conversation run its course because there was some bloodletting that needed to be done there. And I could see the value in letting it run out, but also had to kind of mitigate the damage that it was doing to other volunteers and trying to have a space where a robust conversation can take place, but also make that space safe for everyone to participate in is something that, the left is eating itself over, and it's really hard to do. And I'm quite sure I would have made mistakes in that process, and I don't think it was perfect at all. And if I'd planned it, it would have been different, but it kind of just happened and we had to roll with it.
Well, in a sense, I guess Triple Z has the advantage of, I don't think it is a bubble in that just the diversity of the volunteers we have. And I think the generational diversity is a big thing. So
absolutely.
We have a lot of people there, young, progressive, woke people.
Totally.
Who are, fresh out of high school even, let alone uni. And then we have people who've been there decades, for whom when they arrived, being progressive meant something very different. And, it could have meant, marching in the street and throwing rocks at the QPS to protest Joe Bielke-Peterson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the role of Z, because the environment in Brisbane has changed and our role has changed too. And I guess that's, like, how do you manage that? Like the different outlooks that people have on what exactly the purpose of Triple Z is?
Yeah, that's a really tricky thing. And I think for me, it involved really figuring out what my outlook on Triple Z was and where we needed to go to serve the communities that exist in Brisbane in 2020. 2021, because as fantastically unique as our history is, I found the organisation when I first came in, started getting involved, I found it really backwards looking and kind of self-congratulating about all this stuff that happened in the 70s. I'm kind of like, if you looked outside, there's all this stuff that's happening in Brisbane today, and we can be really, really vital to the cultural communities that are thriving in Brisbane today if we just stop talking about what happened in 1975, even though that was critical. And I have a real appreciation for the history, and I think it's fascinating, and I love reading about it. I love talking to people about it, but it has its place, and it needs to have a place. It needs to be kind of educational, not assuming that everyone knows what it is, which I found a lot of. So I think we carry our history through what we do every single day because, our mission statement, connecting and amplifying the voices of our local communities, it's a really present mission statement. So it kind of focuses us to pay attention to what's happening in the present. And I think that means where the history sits, it just informs how we do what we do in the present. So it's kind of like these things with the quotas, it's not a new thing for us. We've been a progressive organisation for 43 years now. And this is just what being progressive in 2019 looks like. And it is up to the current crop of people and, me and the board to define that. And we will absolutely take everyone's feedback on. But at the end of the day, you kind of just have to trust that they have their own biases. I have my own, but I'm in this role to make the decision. And if people don't agree with it, they can tell me, which they do. But then, I don't think you could argue that we need to be more cognizant of our past because we just are all the time. We can't escape it. We need to be better at defining who we are in the present.
Is it hard when people of a previous Z generation will say, oh, you're not as political as you used to be? Because that's something I hear a little bit.
Yeah, it is. And I think I'm interested to know I always want to have that conversation because I want to know what those people mean by political, because we still have 7 hours of dedicated socio-political news and current affairs programming throughout the week. And that's just in that midday to 1 band where we have Brisbane Line, Eco Radio, Paradigm Shift, Megahertz. And then we have programs outside of that like Radio Versal, Indigibriz, Soldier Sisters even. We still have a lot of really political shows. And especially if you look at us compared to some of our, stations that community broadcasters that we get compared to a lot, like FBI or PBS, Triple R, 3CR, we're kind of like a big mix of all of them. We're not just a music-based broadcaster and we're not just a political broadcaster. We do it all. And I think the balance is what's going to continue to make us vital because the already small media landscape is shrinking, and having a really strong news team and a really strong news voice is hugely important. That's something that I'm absolutely interested in nurturing at Triple Z. But the exact same thing's happening to the music media and it's almost gone. So I think we serve a really important role as being an alternative voice across all of those areas. Even if alternative, maybe not in the sense of what people who would call us not political enough mean alternative, but just another voice, and making sure that our voice doesn't sound like what you hear on Triple J or even Triple R or PBS or FBI. We want to be Triple Z, and defining that is an ongoing process, which I think it should be. Like, you can change, we can be flexible.
Have you gotten much of a chance to go and see how they do things at other community stations and interact with other station managers and things like that?
Yeah. I've so we have the CBAA conference every year, which is a big community radio conference, and I met a lot of fantastic people there. And I've gone and had a look at FBI and PBS and Triple R, and I haven't been to SER. I've driven past it. I've had a look at the actual CBAA itself and seen all the inside of that building there.
What's it like? Because I think I read somewhere that it's actually, in terms of the people working there, it's tiny. But you imagine it as, a giant skyscraper like FBI headquarters or something, just because of the scope of what they do.
Yeah. The CBAA offices are actually on top of FBI radio, and it's in I think it's either Redfern or Surrey Hills on the border of that area.
Yeah,
in
I've been
Sydney.
to FBI.
Yeah, right. So you just walk upstairs.
Oh,
and that's
right,
where the CBAA is.
Yeah.
So it's just a top level of this building, which is a 2-story building. And there's different nooks for the different projects. Like AMRAP is in one room, CRN's in one room, digital radio projects in one room. And then the rest of it's open plan. And everyone's just kind of doing their thing. I thought it'd look more like Triple Z, but it just had like clean walls. It was kind of messy, which I found really gratifying. Anytime that I go to a station that's like kind of messy, like Triple Z, I'm just like, yes, okay, good. This is what it's meant to be like. But PBS are about to move premises to the Collingwood Arts Precinct from where they are, which is in Collingwood. They've got a really cool building. It's in a big old warehouse looking thing, huge ceilings. The layout is really confusing, doesn't make sense. But they've got these 2 beautiful studios and a really amazing live studio where they have live gigs that they invite their subscribers into. And I mean, Triple R is just like the holy grail of community radio. And their performance space is like 100, no, I think it'd be bigger than 100 person capacity, but it's like impeccably sound treated, this beautiful stage. I don't think they have a full backline, but they at least have a piano, which I was super impressed by. And that's like one compound. And then there's the broadcasting compound where they have these 2 wonderful studios and like kind of a green room for their studios. And then they have an office compound, and it's all in this one big kind of nondescript looking building from the outside. But yeah, damn, that is a beautiful studio.
Do you get like ideas about things? Oh, we could just write down piano.
Yeah. I come back with all these notes like piano, but mostly the notes are make more money. Because, we have all of these ideas. We have the capacity to do the kind of things like Right Here, Right Now, the live program that we're doing now. We do that on the Smell of an Oily Rag, and we've got it grant funded. But the 6 months leading up to that, we didn't have any grant funding, and we still started this program, and we just did it with nothing, just an idea and a lot of willpower of some amazing volunteers. And we can still do amazing things like that without huge amounts of money. But where we're going, I think to be a really strong organisation, we just need to make a bit more money so we can be a little more resilient to changes.
How do we do that?
More subscriptions.
Right.
More subscriptions and more sponsorship. They're the 2 revenue streams for pretty much every community broadcaster, no matter how big they are. They just scale up those 2 revenue streams. So, unless you're Fine Music or one of the Christian stations and you have a really big philanthropic or bequest base.
What if we start a cult?
I've thought about that so much. I mean, some people think we're a cult anyway, so, and we're still not making enough money. So maybe we'll just go out and out, make a cult.
Yeah. It can be like one of those, like a Scientology type cult where everything costs money, like to advance in the ranks.
That's a great idea. I thought you were going to say, you come in and we'll give you a personality test and everything will be wrong about your personality, but we can conveniently fix it all.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I like that. I think that's a real model.
Yeah.
But subscriptions have been growing really steadily over the last couple of years, and I think they will continue to grow as we continue to be really vital and relevant to a more diverse range of communities across Brisbane, and sponsorship will grow with that as well.
Is it hard because we don't have hard listenership data?
We have just started doing that. We're doing something presently while we're doing this interview called the Station Community Engagement Survey.
Oh, the survey,
so that gives us limited data, and, it's still much better than what we had previously, which is relying on the kind of Brisbane snapshot of radio listeners in the city.
So that's the one that, I don't know who funds it, but that's like a huge, I guess it must be a survey, right?
Yeah, it is. It's run by McNair.
Right. That tells you how many people exactly listen to, Nova and Triple J and...
Well, all the ones that the commercials and Triple J are in, community radio is explicitly excluded from. Yeah. So we get these ones that are about... I actually don't think they're about community radio. They're just about radio listening generally, and they don't mention state. It's kind of just like, do you listen to commercial radio community radio or the ABC?
Because, since I arrived at Z and found this out, it's kind of mind-boggling that we don't know how many people listen to Triple Z.
The thing about radio, though, is no matter how much you pay for a survey, you're always just extrapolating. So
Yeah.
you can never, we say that we have 250,000 weekly listeners, and we extrapolate that from the Brisbane data and the data that we get from the Station Community Engagement Survey, and that is all kind of run through McNair, and they say you scale it up this way. But even the commercials who are paying top dollar for people to tell them that 1 million people are listening at X amount at X time, they're not calling 1 million people and saying, did you listen to Nova at 3:05 today? They call 1,000 people, and if 300 people say that they listened to Nova that day, they scale that up and say, well, we had whatever the scaled up number is. So it's always a huge guessing game. And the people who sponsor community broadcasters and the people who sponsor Triple Z do it because they know that we have a certain demographic. That's probably what they're more interested in. And they do it because whatever they're selling isn't suitable for Nova or whatever. Or they can't do it however Triple J works. I don't know how their paid packages work, or if they have paid packages at all.
Do they? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I mean, like they're tied into things like festivals. Like, yeah, I guess they sponsor festivals.
But do they give them money? Like, what does their version of sponsorship mean? Because community radio sponsorship means that you're giving us money when you're a sponsor of us.
Yeah.
But traditionally, if you sponsor something, you're the one giving money.
Yeah, and being an ABC thing, maybe there's not even any money involved in that. Maybe it's just, we'll play these bands that are going to be playing at your festival if, we get to put a big red drum on your tent.
Yeah, totally. It'd be worth it in marketing dollars for them.
So besides the quota wars, what are some of the other biggest challenges you've faced since becoming station manager?
I think learning about budgets and finances has been really, really interesting and probably my biggest blind spot. And yeah, managing people, which is much easier to do intuitively, managing people than managing money, because you actually have to know what's happening with your money to make sound decisions, but people you can do more intuitively. So learning those two things has been my biggest kind of challenges, and also just that switching off and managing myself and making sure that I'm not giving 100% of myself into the role, which I found it really hard to, and I have changed my lifestyle a little bit to make sure I get actual downtime, because when I go out to gigs or go out and be a social person in the world, people still think I'm the manager of Triple Z in that very moment, and they want to talk to me about their show application or this thing that was annoying them that they heard on the radio, or something that I don't want to talk about at that very moment. And that, like, I burnt out hard by living my life how I lived it in pre-station manager days, and continuing to be as social as I was, and just getting to the stage where it's just like I can't. It just gave me anxiety to leave, to go to gigs, because I was just like, I don't want to talk. I know this person's going to be there, and I had to get mad at them about this and had to tell them off about that, and I don't want to deal with that then, because I know they're going to try and talk to me.
So do you just not go out as much?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bit of a shame.
It's a bit of a shame. But it's also, it's a shame, but I'm at the stage where I've been able to bounce back and I can go to things that I really want to go to. Perhaps I was going out a bit too much beforehand, but now I'm finding a lot of joy in staying home and like finding hobbies, like playing guitar a lot more than I used to, and I play in a band now, and I go to yoga, do all these things that make me have a life outside of Triple Z and the music community, which I just absolutely needed. I couldn't just talk about the same shit 24 hours a day.
I mean, though, joining a band with Alex Campbell is not exactly extricating yourself from community radio and music.
Yes, she is our volunteer coordinator and hosts a program. And I thought that. I thought that, but I was like, nah, I'm just going to... Playing in a band is like a total bucket list thing for me, and I was just... it was right when I was like really, really stressed out last year, and I saw Alex post that she was looking for people to jam out these songs with. I really loved her demos, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And it's even, during the really busy periods when going to rehearsal seems like this huge extra thing, when I get there, I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
And it's a good excuse to leave. Like, if you've got something to go to, sure, I could work 12 hours today, or I could work a normal day and I would just deal with whatever I have to deal with tomorrow. shocking revelation.
I was very surprised when I heard you were going to be in Alex's new band, because I had no idea that you played music, as I think a lot of people didn't. When did you start playing guitar?
I would have been 9 or 10. So I've been playing sporadically since then, about 15 years. So yeah, I played it a lot when I was younger, but I had this real love-hate relationship with it where and it's kind of, applies to a lot of other things in my life. If I'm not good at it straight away, I hate it and I'm not going to do it. But I really, really enjoyed it and played it a lot throughout school, and then kind of put it down when I went to uni.
Did you ever play in front of people?
Yeah, I did music classes and we did like performances and stuff like that for music.
Like on school assembly, playing Californication? I swear to God.
I will have you know that is St. Teresa's Idol, and it was Adele.
I swear throughout like grade 10, every second week, a different group of long-haired boys would get up and play Californication.
Were they all equally as excellent?
Yes, and that's not a compliment.
Oh, very funny. Yeah, no, we did stuff at school for music class, and then I the first time I did like a performance outside of music was St. Teresa's Idol, and I sung an Adele song that I can't remember. And my best friend's brother played guitar, and I just sung because I couldn't play and sing at that time. And then, yeah, I kind of just put it down after when I went to uni, and then picked it back up. When I was in Austin, I actually bought a guitar just off Craigslist, a shitty little $40 thing, and just started playing it a lot more then because I was completely surrounded by music and I just craved it. And so I picked it up back then, and then when I got back, I started playing more and more. And yeah, just seeing everyone else pick it up and do it, I was like, no, I can do this and I want to do it, and I'm sick of pretending like I don't want to do it. So just when that opportunity came up, I was like, nah, I'm doing it. I don't care how much of an extra thing it is.
Who are your guitar playing role models?
One of the most recent role models, or the person who really inspired me to pick it up and start playing it, like kind of writing my own music and starting to do that kind of stuff, was June Jones from Two Steps on the Water. So they're a band from Melbourne, and she just plays a nylon string guitar with the fire and fury of 1,000 suns. And I was just like, that is amazing. I am going to figure out how to play like that. And I guess when I was younger, who was I learning? I learned some Amy Winehouse songs, Led Zeppelin. I learned to play Stairway to Heaven, the pinnacle of my guitar playing career.
Because in Full Power Happy Hour, you've got a pretty jangly style, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean, that's definitely informed by the stuff that I listen to and that I like hearing, which is really twerpsy and, all that stuff that happened in underground Australia in the last 5-10 years. In terms of guitar that I really like hearing, like Twerps, Dick Diver, the Goon Sax, I think they have some really fantastic guitar lines. And Angel Olsen, Kath Bloom, who is a folk singer, so a lot of folk singer-songwriters who play a lot of fingerpicky. And like Jessica Pratt is another folk singer, fingerpick style. But it's really broad. I mean, when I played it with Full Power Happy Hour, it's kind of the first time that I've played lead guitar, which is something I'm very much learning is different to, playing rhythm guitar or writing a song and it just being whatever you play on guitar is what the guitar line is. Alex will bring chords and then I have to play over it or figure out something that complements it. And that's a really new thing that I've never done before, which is, I have to think about it a lot more.
I think I don't think about it as much as I should. Like I'll always take a song home, that Adele will bring in or something and go, oh, okay, yeah, I need to write something that sort of goes around this. So she's singing this. And then I'll just run out of time and then it'll be the next practice and I'll just muddle.
Well, how about this thing that I did last time?
Yeah. And
totally.
It's got so bad that we've been recording with Cam lately and I went into the studio not knowing what I was really doing for at least 2 songs. But it came out pretty good.
Well, that's good. I think that just means you're at the stage where you can figure it out like that. And I think I can absolutely see how you overthink these things and, come out with that real plasticky sounding well, I went to music school for 17 years and I know that this works because I'm a genius. But I think I just need to think about it a bit more so I'm not just playing the same thing as Alex or, just playing something that's like a bit different or highlights different parts of the songs. And Alex is really good because with this project, she's got a lot of reference points that she can send me songs for and I can listen to, which I find helps a lot. But it's just been so, so nice having a creative project to focus on that's not just like noodling around, and that we actually play live and record and all that kind of stuff. It's the whole shebang. And the whole crew are awesome. I've really enjoyed getting to know all of them and hanging out with them more.
Was it you or was it Ian who was saying the other night there should be a 4ZZZ family band?
I think I was floating that's what we do if we had some extra time at the Exit Stage Z gig at the Bearded Lady.
Oh, right.
I think we should have a Triple Z family jam band and maybe we could make it like a radiothon thing.
Yeah, like I was thinking about because, I mean, we had that gig at the Beardo in December. That was kind of all Z associated bands, so Stress of Leisure, Adele and Bad Bangers. I'm in two minds because I think it would be really fun, but I don't know if that would seem kind of cliquey and insular.
That's true.
I'm always really concerned about coming across that way because I remember before I was at the station, that was part of what I had in mind about what it was. Like it was just all these people playing their friends' bands and there was a whole other group of people out there who weren't getting their music played just because they didn't know the right people. And I think I have become guilty of that to some extent just because there's only so many hours in a week to go out and listen to new music. And if you see, your mate on Instagram has a new, hey, I'll be in the studio, got this new song. It's like, oh, I'll look forward to that in the hot bin or whatever. And so that's always in the back of my mind.
I think it is such an important question to continually ask yourself, especially as an announcer, because otherwise that does happen. And then you don't realize the cumulative effect of it is that there is now a whole radio station that's just inward looking and really insular and it seems elite from the outside.
Yeah, totally.
But in this weird way.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important question or something to be really cognizant of is who are you doing this for? And, whether it's the Triple Z family jam band, who benefits from that? Is it just like us all getting to jam together because we're friends and it'd be a fun thing for us to do as musicians? Or would it actually be like, could it serve Triple Z? Could it serve the station and the station's mission, not just the people who are at the station and your immediate circles? And I think that's something that any media organisation would battle because everyone, you have a platform and that's such a hugely special thing. But I'm very glad to hear that you think about stuff like that because it's something that I always try to tell people. And I think for the most part, everyone's quite good at it, at not just playing their mates' bands. Yeah, I haven't had to pull anyone up on that. I haven't had to pull up anyone on playing their own music either, which I hope I never have to do.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable. What? Like, really? How do you back announce that?
That was this amazing band. Wow, what a great guitarist that guitarist is. Sure would love to be that person. They're so talented.
Anyway, but more about me and my voice.
It would be super fun though.
Maybe we should just do it as like a different thing, just for our own enjoyment.
Yeah, like a one-off thing. That could be fun.
Maybe we could all learn a super Brizcore song.
Yeah.
And then it'd just be like 17 guitarists, 3 drummers, 4 bass players.
So it actually sounds terrible.
But we'd have a good time.
If we made it sound terrible, I think that wouldn't be elitist.
That's true. But then everyone would be like, oh, fucking Triple Z, you just had to be so underground. You just had to be so alternative. Had to be shit, didn't you?
But then we could do maybe it's not like a super underground Brizcore song. Maybe it could be like that Love You Queensland song from the Channel 7 ads.
I like that. I think we could do that.
All right, we'll make something happen.
Okay, I look forward to this.
Grace, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
If you want to hear Grace's guitar work, the band she plays in, Full Power Happy Hour, have their debut single, Complicit, up on Bandcamp. And I'm sure we can expect to hear more from them in the future. But sadly, despite the best efforts of our devoted research team, there seems to be no surviving evidence of her Adele covers from high school. If you want to hear more podcasts featuring Triple Z people, there's quite a few of them, including Andrew Bartlett, Craig Garrett and Shona Hawkes, Adele Pigvance, Breaker Cossack, Cam Smith, Linda Dark, Alex Campbell, Sam Kelly. They're all in the back catalogue if you want to go find them. Now, I have a job for you. So, the hosting service I use for this podcast, Libsyn, provides some statistics about how many people download this podcast and when. What it doesn't tell me is who you people are. Where are you? How do you listen to the podcast? And most importantly, I think, why? Sometimes I run into podcast listeners out in the wild, and I always really love getting feedback. But I am conscious of the fact that people are tactful, I suppose. People are polite. People... I'm very fortunate to have people come up and say they enjoy the podcast, and that's fantastic. What I think is also valuable, though, is finding out what people don't like about this podcast, and if people have constructive feedback. To that end, I have created a survey on the website SurveyMonkey. It is an anonymous survey that you can fill out. Please fill it out. I want you to fill it out. There are 10 questions. Some of them are multi-part questions, but you only get 10 questions in the free version of SurveyMonkey. But I would be very, very, very happy if you're a listener to this podcast, even if you've only listened to this episode, to go on there and tell me what you think, because I'm very interested and I want to keep making things better. So to that end, it's good to know what you're liking and what could be better. I've also got a few kind of little hypotheticals about some ideas I had for the future, some special things that may be on the horizon, and I just want to gauge your interest in some of those ideas. So to find the survey, I will post a link up on the Gimme Empathy Facebook and Instagram pages for you to find. But if you're not up on those social medias, then I'll provide you the URL right now. So it's surveymonkey.com/r/2QQ69TX. So go up there and fill out the survey, please. It'll be nice. Cool. Okay, if you have any other feedback, of course, you can hit me up at gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, stay aromatic. Small good.